been teaching yoga and meditation for 15 years. My name is Larson. I'm the director for the Center for the Study of Yoga and Health, and I've developed a yoga tradition called Power Yin Yoga. I've also been studying transformation for, well, my whole life, but academically for 10 years or so. And so this is my passion, really, is looking at transforming consciousness through yoga. This is a Mary Oliver poem, one of my favorites. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine, and meanwhile the world goes on. Meanwhile the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So today we're talking a little bit about transformation, about consciousness, about yoga. What does this all mean? These three terms that we hear a lot, but they're not all wonderfully defined. Transformation, very simple definition, big change. The change is happening all the time, but transformation is that kind of big change. You want to change your life? Hopefully you do, because if not, it's too bad, because change does happen. Change is the only constant. It's happening all the time. So the question is how you want to approach that change. So change happens fast, it happens slow, it happens without us realizing it by the fact that we're changing our thoughts, we're having this judgment about this person or this expectation of this situation. We're always shaping and changing our life with every thought, reinforcing what's already been there, but embodying it in a different way, or changing it completely so that it's taking a new direction. You can either let change happen to you, or you can step into it with your eyes open. So we're looking at transformation, these kind of larger changes, these big things we want to move into in our lives. But what are we transforming? Or who are we transforming? So we're starting to look at consciousness. Consciousness is this nebulous thing. But when we look at who this is that's transforming, well, my experience of me is my consciousness, or consciousness has to do with that experience of me. Consciousness defined, here are a few definitions from Merriam-Webster. The first one, the quality of or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself, or the state or fact of being conscious of an external object, state, or fact. It's awareness. The third definition, the totality of conscious states of an individual. So that's a lot of what's getting talked about today, the totality of conscious states of an individual. That's a little more like Jeffrey Martin keeps getting referenced all day today. That's a little more what he's talking about, your state of consciousness. For me, I'm looking at just your ongoing experience of consciousness and what it looks like in the overarching archetype, like this your consciousness that you live in, as well as those moments of being conscious. So this is a tricky term. It's hard to describe it exactly. We're still always looking for it, but I would say it could be said to be the experience or awareness of life. It's the window through which we see, as well as the ground from which we understand. It's our experience of life. So when we're looking at transforming our lives, or just moving through our lives in a more conscious manner, this is what we're looking at. It's this experience. So it's not necessarily just thoughts. It's not just the body. It's all of it. So life changes in the map of consciousness. Where are we going with this transformation of consciousness? Well, consciousness development takes on many different forms depending on who you're talking to. On the psychological front, a more common experience is psychological development. So people talk about this development of consciousness, this development of the psychology of an individual over time. So Maslow's hierarchy you might be familiar with. Physiologically, there are things we need. We need to be able to breathe. We need food, water, sex, sleep. Certain things, sex to procreate, water to live right now, breath to live right now. Safety is the next level. Once we have those things met, then the next level is safety. So security of the body, security of resources, security in your family, of your health. After that, you have love and belonging, friendship, family, intimacy. So these are the things. Once you have this, then you can move on to this. Once you have this, then you can move on to esteem. Once you have esteem, eventually there's this experience of self-actualization. So for a long time, we thought that this experience of consciousness was probably moving up through this and then maybe beyond. When we started looking at spiritual masters or enlightened people like Dr. Martin we'll speak about later. We thought this was all connected, and it's not necessarily connected. But for right now, we can see that this is a track of psychology that people move through, and they get more and more comfortable along this, and then they move toward more self-actualization, becoming more of knowing who you are and recognizing who you are. On another track, there's the Path of Freedom scale that Dr. Martin put together. He looks at enlightenment, non-symbolic consciousness. It's not exactly easy to get to those places. There are researchers like him, and I've been helping with some of that research, that are looking to make that happen, looking to make that easier. But in the meantime, what I'm talking about is approaching well-being with less lofty goals. I'm looking at right now, with the tools we have right now, simple daily happiness with the usual options of enlightenment along the way, because, of course, that will be fantastic. And hopefully, Jeffrey is successful, and in a week, my stuff will just be kind of fun stuff on the side, or in a year. So for now, we're looking at yoga as a path toward greater happiness on the daily experience. So yoga takes on many definitions. People talk about yoga being exercise. Oh, I'm going to go take a yoga class so I can get in shape. People think of yoga as a spiritual practice. Yoga is branding now. There's all these types of yoga all over the world. There's yoga clothes. It's an industry. It's this massive thing that's becoming bigger and bigger. But the roots of yoga are older than we even know of. We don't actually know that much about its far history. Yoga is not clearly defined in the Vedas. It's only defined by its context. In the Vedas, which are thousands of years old, yoga is literally just used as a descriptive term that people already know what it means. So kind of like now if you were reading in an encyclopedia about something along roads, they wouldn't really define what a road is, probably, because we all know what a road is. So that's the same thing in the Vedas. They refer to yoga as this thing that everyone understood, so it was never clearly defined. So we don't know except for the context. And from the context, it seems to have something to do with union, maybe a practice that tries to connect people with union. Union with what? Union with the divine? Union with nature? It's some sort of union experience of connecting the person with something that's bigger than that. And the idea of where yoga is reaching towards a type of non-dual or non-symbolic consciousness. Now, there is no evidence that yoga actually leads towards this. However, for the last thousands of years that people have been practicing yoga, that's the intention, and certainly there are lots of yogis that have gotten there. But in the meantime, for you and me today, tomorrow, next week, to have a better experience, yoga does a lot of other good things. It alleviates pain, both physical pain, emotional pain. It clears the mind. It calms the nervous system, reduces anxiety and depression. It helps a long list of known conditions. If you want more on this information, you can see the Center for Yoga and Health.org website, which is listed in your program. And it can get into all the science behind that. Yoga is proven in Western science to help all kinds of mental, emotional, physical conditions. So it's fantastic in a lot of different ways. It also is good for community building. So yoga helps all kinds of things. But more simply, to keep it simple for today, generally yoga techniques can make you feel good. I know this as a researcher, but also from experience. So how does yoga work? If we're looking at using yoga to change our lives in very simple ways, there are different ways that we can experience yoga. So classically, there are 4 different paths of yoga, and people would use any path that worked for them. I'm breaking them down in the way I like to. Karma yoga, you could say, is a yoga of the body. So karma yoga is the path of service. So it's saying that if you give your whole life giving service to other people, eventually you'll find that union that you're looking for. That was the original intention. In the meantime, you're living this selfless life that's doing something really beautiful for you. You feel good by giving to others. So that's karma yoga. That's through the physical body. The yoga of the mind is jnana yoga, which Doug, I think, was mentioning earlier. Jnana yoga is the yoga of knowledge. It's actually acquiring the wisdom and the knowledge of the text, and it's actually considered the most difficult path. So people will just read these texts and try to understand what all these old sages and mystics of the path were meaning. And then the yoga of the heart is bhakti yoga. It's the yoga of devotion. Those of you that were at my workshop yesterday, we looked at this a little bit. And it's just literally opening your heart so much to devotion of whatever divine experience you're looking for, divine connection you're looking for, that you end up having this union experience. And then the 4th path is the spiritual experience, or that's how I'm defining it. But Raja Yoga uses the body, uses the mind, but it creates these experiences. It's kind of working in the mind in the sense that it's looking for those states, for those alternate states of consciousness that we've all come to love. I always call it the yoga buzz for my clients. So when you leave, you have this yoga buzz. And then another way, so yoga uses these 4 paths, but then another way that we can look at yoga is that it's usually either done by connecting with the divine and connecting with these beautiful experiences either through the experience of the body or by controlling the body and seeing the body as something that is a distraction. So in the teaching that I come from and the philosophy that I speak from, you'll notice I tend to go through the body. I think it's fantastic to be in a body, and this is exactly our window to that divine experience, to that everything's better experience, I guess. But certainly the yoga that works by controlling the body has fantastic results, and the research is there, and people love it also. But yoga as a practice. So what does it mean to have a practice? Participate in your moment more consciously. So it's just saying, okay, I can just go around and do what I do, or I can choose to participate more consciously. So I can decide, oh, I'm going to be aware of what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind. I'm going to decide how I relate with the people around me. So when we talk about having a practice, it might be a sitting practice or a posture practice, where you're actually sitting still for a while and consciously thinking. But it can also be a practice that's a daily practice. So this is this term practice. But it's basically to be conscious about what you're doing, whether it's in your daily life or in a class or a specific yoga practice. So now yoga for transformation. People come to me and they're like, oh, I'm gonna change my life by losing weight, or I'm gonna learn some new things, or I'm gonna approach this transformation, I'm gonna go to therapy, and that's wonderful. But what people don't always realize is that it doesn't matter how you approach transformation, you're going to affect everything. So if you want to come into transformation with your eyes wide open, you can look at these different aspects of yourself and recognize how they're all changing, and that helps you to be more aware. So the mind, the body, the heart, the spirit, the environment, these are how I'm breaking it down today. These things are all interconnected, so we can look at each of them as we go on this path. But we can also recognize that they're all interconnected. So each one affects all of the rest. So if you decide to approach it mostly through the body, just realize that you're also going to affect your mind, your heart, your spirit. So conscious transformation is yogic practice. There are 2 approaches to consider. If you're looking at practice and you already have a practice, and you want to take that deeper, then you look at the edges of practice, which we'll talk about in a moment. As far as daily life and practice in your daily life and using yoga in that way, we're looking at one step at a time in daily life. That's the main message there. One step at a time. Transformation works best in small steps. I've been studying transformation for years because as a human, I went through massive transformation when I was young, and I spent many years in a severe depression. And when I came out of that and I went and found myself suddenly in this experience of life that was just unbelievable and beautiful and radiant. I was like, wow, people don't have to live like that, and people should know that. But how is it that some people can go through these terrible dark nights of the soul, these terrible experiences of life is hellish, and come through and, it's like, in heaven, life is good and blissful. And other people just kind of stay stuck and stay sad and stay caught up in these stories of life sucks. So how does that happen? How do you have a successful transformation? So that's what got me into studying this. And one thing I found is that lots of people try to make these big changes in their lives for the better, but they try to take on all these different things at the same time. They say, okay, well, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Kind of like a New Year's resolution, right? Oh, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and it's all going to change. But what I find is that small steps are what work. One thing at a time. So when I became a vegetarian, first it was just like, okay, I need to figure out how to cook vegetables, because I grew up in the Midwest in the States, and we ate like lots of meat, lots of animal products. I don't know how to cook this stuff. So one step at a time, you learn how to cook, one thing at a time. That's it, one example. If people are having negative thought patterns, one thing at a time, you pick one thing to work with. So you find easy practices to integrate into your days. And I actually like people to place reminders to help establish those. So what we'll do sometimes is we'll create like a logo. I'm a graphic designer in a past life, so I like a logo for your transformation. If you're saying, I'm choosing to make this transformation, what do I want out of it? Well, I want peace, or I want happier thoughts, or whatever it is that you're looking for. I want enlightenment, whatever it is. That's a little later down the steps, I think. Then you pick a logo, pick a symbol that represents that, and put it around you so that you can remember your practice. And we'll talk about those practices in a moment. But reminders help, because otherwise we're creatures of habit, and we're looking for new habits. So it might be switching your watch to the other wrist so you remember to breathe into your belly. Or it might be putting a little sunshine on the dashboard of your car and on your cell phone. So every time you see it, you shift to this more positive thought. So we're changing habits, we're changing patterns for lasting and mindful transformation. It's easy to say, oh, I'm going to go on this new diet and make it last for a week, but it's not that useful. But if you can say, oh, I'm going to start, I'm going to stop eating after 9 at night, and then just stay with that. That's a small change that you can make. Or I'm going to stop thinking negatively. Well, you can start by just every time I notice thinking negatively, starting with one positive thought that you're going to retrain with. So practical and purposeful transformation through edges. Edges are where we find our limits, our bindings. This is what holds us back or contains us. So the edge of our comfort zone is where we discover the richness of our relationships, both within our experience and with the world and the people around us. So as practitioners of yoga or of meditation or of anything, as humans, we can start looking at edges. So those of you that already have a practice and just want to take things deeper, it's the edges that help us to be conscious about our transformation. So I'm going to move through the rest of this pretty quickly. So we can look at changes in our body. So as far as the daily piece goes, the small things, we can remove physical blockages through things like yoga postures, and also things like rolfing, like chiropractic, just body care, by recognizing that we hold things in our bodies that are reflections of our mental patterns and our emotional patterns. So just like we were talking about earlier, when you change the body, you change the emotions, you change the mind. You can do it by cleansing your body. Remove one unhealthy eating habit at a time, or cut back drastically. So cutting back drastically sometimes feels like a lot. I'm going to cut all sugar out of my diet, all caffeine out of my diet. One thing at a time. Just take one at a time, and once that feels good and you've gotten over the withdrawal, then maybe you remove another one. Nourishing your body, add one healthy habit in at a time. Maybe you're saying, I want to eat healthier. Well, try cooking with whole grains once a week if you've never done it before. Change the way you move. Yoga posture practice is fantastic, and this is a good place to find edges, which is a whole other topic, and if you're interested in this, you can email me or talk to me about it. But with the yoga posture practice, that's where you can start to notice, where am I uncomfortable? Where do I want to stop and just get out of this? Why is it that I like to do yoga really fast instead of pausing and breathing and feeling what's uncomfortable in the deep postures that I do? And if you find those edges, notice what's uncomfortable and breathe into it, you can start releasing all these emotional and mental patterns. Changing the way you move, literally adopting a better standing or seated posture. Changing the way you breathe. These are all ways that you can just start making a difference in your body, which affects your mind. For your mind, there are lots of different options here. But one thing that I will say that's really helpful is to change your thought patterns by just creating a mantra. So your mantra might be, I am safe. If you're someone who finds yourself in anxiety or fear a lot, your mantra might be, life is good. If you find yourself thinking negatively a lot. So just considering these new mantras and letting yourself come back to it. Every time you find yourself being judgmental about someone you work with, just coming back to that mantra that you pick, whatever it is. So there are all different sorts of suggestions here. Considering new perspectives is always a good one. Literally trying to consider something that you just completely disagree with and try something different with it. Maybe it's possible. Heart changes. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones. Love the people and situations that you don't want to. So again, we're just going to pick one of these to get started, right? But literally, if you're driving, if you're standing in line, if you're frustrated with people, try to love. Try loving situations that you don't want to love. And spiritually, notice what you believe. Notice what you yearn for. And just consider opening yourself up to some new ideas. Lots of ideas for changing your environment. You can always do that. So lasting change, yoga is more than getting on a mat. It's the intention and the awareness you bring to your moments. Practice on the mat or practice on the sitting cushion if it's meditation is important and can be revolutionary. But aside from that, it is not required to bring yoga into your life. Radical transformation can be jarring or it can fall away quickly. So like New Year's resolutions, inspiring weekends or books. Are you going to walk away from this weekend and say, I'm going to do a walking meditation every day for an hour? That would be fantastic. But even just doing a 10-minute meditation or a 5-minute meditation might be a step that would be easier to follow through with, and then increase it to 10 minutes. A major uninvited change is a whole other topic, but you can learn to cope with that through these small steps. That's another poem that I love. I'll put that up at the end for you to read. So risk believing. Finding your edge may mean risking believing. Believing you can do something that you hadn't believed was possible. Taking that leap of faith is one of the most extraordinary things to create lasting transformation. Is actually consider what you didn't think was possible. Great yoga begins at your edge and your willingness to take a breath outside of your comfort zone. Consider perspectives that you don't agree with. Consider opening your heart when it feels uncertain. Notice what you want to hold on to, where you want to hold your body or your heart closed, and decide if that's really worth holding on to anymore. None of this is required for change. Every step is up to you. But you can step forward with your eyes open. You can direct your change and appreciate your choices and your path more fully in every moment. It starts with a deep breath, with a choice, and then another breath, and then the choice to stay on that path or not. It's an ongoing process. Life is what you make of it. Thank you so much.